and just sharing that ride with other people. It's, really social and great for those kinds of things. Carpooling, what I tell people is it's a community at first. We just happen to want to fix traffic right now.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today we have Savern Mann joining us from Carpoolin. Welcome along, great to have you on the show, Sav. How are you?
Hey Paul, happy to be here. I'm feeling great.
You've got a startup at the moment, Carpoolin.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to talk about that. So we'll come back and we'll delve into that a little bit more.
Cool.
But to start with, a big thank you to our show partners as well, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Workday, and Gorilla Technology. Really looking forward to delving into a bit of your story, your insights on gaming, carpooling, startups, and the like. There's all sorts we will no doubt get a chance to delve into. But first up, we've got our New Zealand sort of tech news. We'll tap into, and then some of the international stuff, and then we'll come back and
Cool.
and we'll have a bit more relaxed in terms of our time to delve in a bit further there. The first topic on the list is that there's been a bit of a change in our New Zealand emergency service and their access to cellular locations on phones. And so, a lot of people have maybe, heard some of this in the news. And I was there when I got invited down to New Zealand Police HQ, I think it was in Wellington, I don't know, a number of years ago, where they were just turning on that initial capability where when you dialed 111, you would be able to, or your location detail would be transmitted to emergency services at that time with the right sort of phone and so on. And that's just become a very standard thing, not just New Zealand, but, globally around the world. You call emergency services. If you get cut off, whatever happens, they had that access to your location. There were some hoops they could jump through also, I think, in some other scenarios, but largely, that was around, calling 111. The new capabilities, what they're calling device location information, is designed, we're told, to, enhance the speed of response, so that without them having to jump through hoops with a telco, you don't have to call 111, but a scenario where a family member says, hey, we've no idea where Paul is. He's been gone for whatever period of time. We think he's in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. He went off hiking in the mountains, or, we're worried he's going to do some harm to himself, or, there's a whole lot of scenarios, right?
Yeah.
That's the type of scenario whereby emergency services, without having to jump through hoops with the telco, can get straight to a location.
Wow. They could actually ping your phone?
Well, I guess the network already is collecting that sort of data in some form, but yeah, so they can basically pinpoint you. So we're coming from an environment where citizens have been used to a huge degree of privacy, and technology enables so much that's sort of so helpful from a safety perspective, an automation and efficiency perspective and so on.
Yeah.
But this kind of lean in to technology to be able to, for instance, get location. And there are hoops they have to jump through. They've got to, comply with the relevant, legal things from a privacy perspective. So they can't just go, well, I don't know. Technically, I haven't seen the screens and so on. Of course, we've all heard around, somebody who works for, say, New Zealand Police, who's like, oh, well, I want to look up this information, and they look up and varying other entities, right? So there is that background where we know that in the past, some of this information, some private information, has been used in ways that are really, really untoward. And you can imagine this sort of thing in the hands of criminals. Really, really bad. So yeah, it's very interesting to me to see in a number of areas these sort of changes. The other one is in relation to the move away from charging a tax on petrol and diesel and moving to road user charges across the board. Now, that to me, that sounds fine. The bit I haven't got my head around is our approach, because for that one, your vehicle's going to be constantly, tracked. So, everywhere it goes, gives them enough information to compile, how much driving you did on public roads versus, say, if you're a farmer, you might do a lot of driving around on a private road. You don't have to pay, tax for that time. But it does seem to be quite a big pivot, and you could argue that it's not a pivot away from privacy because there's regulations and there's so on around it. The flip side is that we know no one is actually that great at keeping data private, right? We just don't see perfection when it comes to data privacy. How do you land on this?
I'm okay with it because my understanding is that this is to curb sort of the disparity between EVs and gas cars, right? And just getting essentially taxes from these guys that are going and charging their vehicles. And
well, the EVs already pay road user charges.
Oh, is that true?
So that side's already covered, right?
Well, the tracking side of it, yeah, like no one likes it, and I guess it's fine in the right hands, assuming that we use it for the right reasons.
Yeah. There's no issue with it when the data's all being used for legitimate purposes. It's the flip side, inappropriate uses. So there's two scenarios under which that can happen. Look, I can't imagine this is going to happen anytime in the next few election cycles, but you look at some countries overseas and they end up with governments that have got different values on giving people privacy and on what human rights looks like. And sometimes that comes very, very quickly and abruptly. So I think it's just being aware that there's areas where governments can get off track, maybe in very small ways, but that can make a difference in people's lives. And then the flip side is when the data is just not kept private, right? And so you've got a bad actor who happens to work for an entity that has access to this data, and they're feeding that off to, some criminal gang, what have you, down the road, and are like, this is where Sav is right now. And look, he took a whole lot of our business away because we were invested in the local, taxi fleet, and he's got everyone ride sharing with his carpooling service, and our business has dropped by 50%. So we need to knock him off. This is good because we know exactly where he is and we can do it.
I'll say, like, for me,
devil's advocate. Yeah.
I'll say for me, like, obviously you have contracts and things that hold people accountable if this data is used maliciously or whatever. But a lot of transport agencies around the country would love looking at this data and trying to plan infrastructure around that kind of thing. It's obviously a moving goalpost, but knowing that on like a behavioral level is like really helpful.
Yeah, well, I think we have a lot of that anyway, and some of it is available on a very anonymized basis. Every time you go out for a drive, and if you fire up Google Maps or you've got an in-car, connected GPS like Tester and so on, right? You can see what all the traffic flow. The data is actually already there.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll keep moving. Now, Rotorua are having their. This is and it's not just Rotorua, but I think this was the news story that came up, is that there's concerns over misinformation, deepfakes, and manipulation of public opinion as Rotorua have their first local election since, I guess, Gen AI technology, ChatGPT, has become popular, and other image generation tools like Midjourney and the like. And this is triggering some requests for better regulation, clarity over what's appropriate from an ethical standards perspective. Now, I do find this is fascinating because there's always that challenge with new technology, right? Is there enough regulation? Should we regulate? Should we not? But the political side is an area where at times people will push the limits, and we've seen this. I don't know, Wellington quite often. There's been, especially in their local body elections and mayoral candidates and things. There've been dramas kind of there over the years, but all around the country we have different challenges. So I was kind of curious to see this particular one getting attention. Do you have thoughts? I mean, is it important to regulate, or do you let things become a little bit of a Wild West and you see how bad it gets and then you jump in and you bring some guidance? Or is it really just that the Electoral Commission, etc., we have some general guidance around, hey, this is what most people feel is kind of appropriate use of AI. This is what's not appropriate. And because you can imagine the sort of bad light that one candidate might try and put another candidate in a comical kind of scenario, right?
Which happens
with AI generated stuff, which has happened, prior to AI. But do we need to draw the lines differently in an AI world?
I don't think so. I wonder what regulating AI even looks like. The solutions I've heard, I think people want to verify images that certain institutions or people put out. And that's how you verify it. And to me, that's the way you'd go about, ensuring that kind of information is legitimate through those outlets. And I'd be for that kind of thing. I don't see anything like that tracking, like when I read articles or anything. So what that looks like in practice, I don't know. And, people calling names to other politicians, it happens. And I think when lines are crossed, people talk about it, and usually things happen. So
yeah, I think people get held to account, right? If they're pushing too far in different areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was an interesting call to be pushing so quickly in this area. Now, also on a local front. The SIS, the Security Intelligence Service for New Zealand, they've put out their Security Threat Environment 2025 report, and this was something I was discussing in the media this morning, and there was quite a bit in the report. It's not a big report, so it's reasonably accessible for folks who are interested in having a look, and it's also pretty concerning. The headline, or the first heading says New Zealand is facing the most challenging national security environment of recent times, and it delves into all the ways in which, as a country, we're at risk, and some of those misinformation and disinformation and radicalizing of people, and what potential that brings from a potential of sort of terrorist attacks and so on. And of course, New Zealand has already been impacted in those regards. So we have some real world understanding of these realities that prior to that were always things that happened elsewhere in the world and weren't so relevant. But the other bit that I guess really sort of caught my attention is the level of, or the warnings around espionage when it comes to New Zealand's technology, our innovations, our whether it's the most cutting edge companies or sometimes people in fields that you might not associate with that being, with their technology wanting to be captured by international players. But there's a real highlight of risks, particularly from China, Iran, and Russia mentioned, and really the report has a very, very heavy focus on China especially, and that's quite concerning because China is our biggest trade partner, right? 25% of what we export on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis is going to China. Yet the government are telling us that this is, the Chinese government are very, very untrustworthy when you read through the signals from the report. So there's a lot of advice there from a cybersecurity perspective, encouraging organizations to make sure they're following the advice around critical controls, around the New Zealand Information Security Manual. But there's a few areas where they give some quite specific case study examples that are some of which are interesting to review. They also give some guidance around what you should do if you are traveling to some of these foreign countries. Now, the examples that they give in terms of protective security advice, there's probably not too many countries where you would go to this level, but the aforementioned, ones would likely be the ones that would fall most into this category. So I think I might just share the whole lot, because I covered most of them off on the Herald Now show this morning, but I think we can go a little bit deeper here. So, and a lot of this is to do with our technology. So they're saying, when traveling overseas for work, be careful about how and when you use or share sensitive information. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Be cautious about giving your personal contact details to people you meet. Consider providing your official or business contact details instead. Maintain physical control of documents and electronic devices at all times. Now, this has been advice for a long time, but probably a lot of people aren't aware of that. Now, probably not for visiting every country. I've heard that type of advice largely around visits to China.
Yeah.
And it's also around China where I've heard of people coming back, and you're hearing stories around compromise to devices. So, yeah, so the next point connects to that directly, which it says, don't leave electronic devices or sensitive information unattended in hotel rooms, including in safes. So this is sort of the common one where someone turns up somewhere, they'll keep their phone on them, but they'll leave their laptop charging in a room or leave it in a safe.
Yeah.
The guidance here is do not do that. So that's probably is an important message to get across. They're saying don't charge your electronic devices with a charger you do not own or via USB charging outlet. So make sure you own the charger, it's your existing cable, and so on, because
and it's not going into the back of it.
That can get used from a compromised perspective, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's just some other basics: set complex and unique passwords for each device, disable wireless and Bluetooth functions when not in use, avoid using public Wi-Fi, including in hotels. Be wary. This last one's got to caught me out, but it makes sense because we're talking a lot of tech type stuff. Be wary of drinking alcohol and reducing your inhibitions. So
this is common sense, Paul.
It is. But when you travel, do you have a drink or two?
Yes, within reason.
Right, so it is interesting, but to see this actually in black and white this is official government guidance that, and it says when traveling for work. Now there's a little bit of a blurry line because if you work for different types of organisations, it doesn't matter whether you're on a work trip or not. Yeah. But there is a degree to which you're on work, you're more likely to be. You're more interested in your entity and so on, and more likely to be following what you do and,
definitely,
work devices and so on. But often, we've certainly seen it where people will be traveling to different parts of the world where security could be a challenge. They might be traveling personally, but they're actually taking work devices because they need to get work done. So there is an element here of, I think, it blending across into personal travel too. Yeah,
that's super important. It's good to remind staff, especially if they have devices from the company. But usually it's not like the people that know about it really need to know about it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you would think, but I don't think these conversations happen enough. Look, if you're inside, let's say some of our very top tech companies, then the sort of, discussions and policies in-house in, say, a Rocket Lab is going to be different from a typical run-of-the-mill company. But let's say that your startup has developed some really, really good, technology that
Impossible.
may be of interest to another country. It may allow a competing company to get ahead of you by, taking use of that technology a little bit faster than you can. I mean, delve into the report. There's a whole lot more in there around, they're even pushing back on things like sister cities relationships.
Wow.
And saying these relationships can be utilized in untoward ways, right?
Yeah.
So things that we just think, well, this is just us being friendly to with other cities and other states, and they're saying, well, actually, you need a bit of caution. So if you are in a company, organization, government entity where these things are important and you don't feel you've been fully looped in, then just reading this is this is all very sort of simple public stuff, right? But the fact that this information is being put out generally to everybody, this is the non-secret stuff. We could go a few steps deeper into the stuff that's secret, but the fact that this is being put out as a real warning for New Zealand, I think is pretty important that we take it on board and we treat it seriously.
Definitely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I always kind of have the stance of like being pretty open anyway, and so like I'm not really hiding anything, and I couldn't imagine me working for like the government or having like super secret documents or whatever. And obviously in those situations, leave the work laptop maybe at work and travel.
But I think that's part of the problem, right? As Kiwis, we all think what we're doing, there's nothing here anybody else would be interested in.
Right.
But actually, the whole world today is driven by, information and data. You've got your startup. You don't know what sits within that could be helpful to somebody else, that could advance somebody else's purposes, or the data that's in there, or combining your data with somebody else's data and somebody else's data.
There's also the question of being connected to the internet, because there are a lot of vulnerabilities out there. Yeah.
And 100%. And I think that is part of the messaging, right? Is that we've got to make sure that we're shipshape when it comes to our preparedness from a cyber perspective. And as a country, we're not always getting that right. Let's tap in on just a couple of the international topics. So Excel has a new Copilot formula function. And this sort of came out in about the last week, I think, since I first read about it. But I see that this headline has gone somewhat viral today. Microsoft launches AI function in Excel, but warns not to use it for any task requiring accuracy or reproducibility. And it really made me chuckle because, of course, when you're working with spreadsheets and financial information, what do you want? You need it to be accurate, and you need the results to be reproducible, that they're going to be completely consistent every single time.
Oh yeah.
And so to sort of read this, you can see why it was getting a fair bit of attention on the likes of Reddit and on social media today when it came out. But I actually think the idea of having Gen AI type functionality within spreadsheets, Google were ahead in terms of getting this functionality out in Google Sheets.
Right.
Microsoft having that available. Well, it's still in beta, and probably most, I would say most of our listeners probably, if they go to Excel now and type equals Copilot open bracket, Excel's going to look back at them with a blank face because that function hasn't actually been turned on for them yet. But that's what you do if you do want to try it out.
Yeah.
So, look, I think this sort of capability, it is useful. People just need to use it within a context of understanding what Gen AI can and can't do, right?
Yeah, and that reminder of sometimes AI is wrong is a good one to remember.
Yep. Other news, we've got Australia's company Drone Shield. They've developed AI-powered defence tech to detect and neutralise drones. And they've grown very, very quickly due to there being this, rising global demand for autonomous security solutions. And I thought it was really interesting that this company, They're already at a $3.3 billion valuation. Yeah, listed on the ASX.
Did you happen to catch the drone stuff that's happening in Ukraine right now with the fiber optic cable? Have you heard about this?
Fill me in on that one. I've seen a fair bit on the drone activities over there, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the fiber optic cable.
So obviously there's a war happening in Ukraine, and drone combat, Ukraine is using them, and the way they're getting around having to transmit data to them is they're just running fiber optic cable on these drones. And so you'll see a drone just shoot past you and this cable like in the forest. And yeah, Russian soldiers, I've just seen footage of people like trying to find this invisible cable and like cutting it and taking down these drones. So the Australian startup is super cool. Obviously drones are going to be here and super advanced. They're already super advanced.
Yeah.
And to develop, systems around that is super cool.
Swarms of fiber optic drones.
Yeah, it's like littered the forest with this cable. Just no interference, I guess.
Yeah. And so you can see why, counter drone, tech is growing in interest, and also, these things land in all sorts of other. There's all sorts of other environments where we don't necessarily want things getting, taken out by drones. Couple of other headlines I'll give a mention to. I see it being reported that AI bots, effective, mostly probably like web crawlers and those sort of, fetching information from online, are now understood to be dominating web traffic.
Yeah.
So, web servers are getting bogged down with visits that they may not necessarily want to be actually happening at all. So this is I think it's a concern. It's a challenge that we've had the ability to feed back to search engines for quite a number of years with on a website, and put in a setting that says that the website shouldn't be indexed, and Google will comply with that, Bing, etc. will comply with that, and they will not go visit that website and suck down all the content.
Right.
However, we haven't seemed to land on the same, and there are some workarounds that we've talked about in recent episodes.
Yeah.
On how somebody can potentially block this sort of traffic, but largely the industry hasn't jumped on board and committed to an equivalent of what we've seen for search engines. So I think it's a concern, and it's going to need to be addressed in one form or another sooner or later. At the moment, you basically have to use somebody like Cloudflare to try and protect your site from.
I'm thinking about bringing back an old capture, on the front page of my website.
Well, the AIs are good enough that they can pretty much own that sort of thing. So the idea of
we need new captures
of a process that an AI can't figure out. Usually the AIs learn that stuff pretty quickly.
Okay.
The other thing that caught my attention was a rights group in the UK. New Zealand Herald was reporting on this, reacted to Britain's, in quotes, invasive tech facial recognition. The rights groups are alarmed by Britain's widespread use of facial recognition technology at public events. Critics argue it's invasive, lacks transparency, raising privacy and civil liberties concerns. The rollout includes concerts, sports venues, and we're seeing an increasing level of debate. One thing on this basis, I think most of the time, probably most of the population are pretty relaxed around a level of surveillance, facial recognition, these types of technologies. But there is, and I don't know whether the number is growing, but there is certainly a vocal minority who are really concerned around these sorts of things happening. I think at some stage we'll find some I guess some interesting people maybe from sort of differing sides of the fence to kind of get in and debate this on a podcast, because I keep hearing a whole range of perspectives on it. I saw on social media the other day with what was it? Oh, we had the New Zealand announcement of digital driver's licenses coming through. Now, I think, digital everything generally makes life easier, but there is this kind of flip side to some of these things, and I think it was probably on X. I saw a post from whichever political party, probably National Party. The comments below it showed me that there is a real uncomfortableness with, maybe you could class it as the over digitalization of society,
right?
And so, or some certainly would. And this is the thing of what is too much, what is not enough. How do you get that balance right? And I just don't think you're going to please everyone. But I do think we've got to go through and we've got to have the debate. We've got to look at, well, okay, if people feel so strongly about it, why? And does that carry any legitimacy? Or are people just, are they totally nuts and they're imagining, a conspiracy that will never ever happen? And so I think, it is an area we need to delve into a little bit more.
My thoughts, especially on the surveillance front, is it's going to happen. It will happen in our lifetimes for sure. And I think it's couched in the safety kind of umbrella. And I think it's good to have these things if, certain events were to occur. So it is grounded in something, a positive benefit if something was to happen. But it goes back to that other conversation we were having with being tracked and like who's using this data, and who are the people, or the players in that space. Yeah.
All right. So keen to hear a bit more about your story.
Oh, buddy.
I
thought you'd never ask.
So, Severn, now's your chance. Tell us a little bit more. I'm keen to understand a little bit about your background, working in gaming, grinding gears, and what you're doing with carpooling. So maybe you can talk before your startup, and then we can delve into the startup story a little bit.
For sure. Grew up in a little town called Upper Hutt, New Zealand, born and raised. My parents are from Cambodia. And I've just been all around it, video games especially, growing up on Nintendos. And 2005 was sort of like when I left high school. The year later I enrolled at Nat Cole, and I just fell in love with 3D animation. And I was working at a McDonald's restaurant after high school, and I became a manager in between while studying at Nat Cole, studying 3D animation. And in my head, I was like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be awesome to put people in front of this digital environment to kind of training and training them for these procedures.
How were you trained for the procedures in McDonald's when you were there?
You're buddied up with someone, typically.
Right. And so you just learn through doing.
If that particular restaurant has the funds to pay someone else to look over you, do you know what I mean? Like there are times when you'll just get like 10 hours of training and then you're expected to know everything.
Right.
But I just thought it would be so cool to put people in this virtual environment where they could learn and actually learn the proper procedures. And I was like,
headset type scenario, I guess, if you were looking at it today.
Or just like an interactive, whatever. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And so the next couple years, in between working and studying, I put together this presentation that I wanted to show one of the owners there. I thought it was the coolest thing, and it started this itch I had to this entrepreneurial, whatever you'd call it, thing that I had, because no one else was doing anything like that. I didn't know of anyone. I thought that was super cool, like to have a virtual space, but not only for entertainment, but for a direct application to things that we deal with in society. So that was really cool. Anyway, I finish up studying, and then I learn about media design school. I know you've had some lectures on, and I come up to learn game development specifically. I'm like, movies are cool and all, but games are where it's at. I go to media design school, I learn, and really all I focused on there was normal maps. I know about normal maps. I need to generate this thing and just make assets using it. This lecturer showed me it the first day I was there, and I was like, I'm done. Like, this is me. Like, you guys do whatever. And I kind of didn't follow their curriculum at all. I was sort of fueled with this hate and anger, and I just wanted to like make games. So I was just driven. Obviously, I did the course and everything like that, and passed. But the thing that I produced. What's that?
Well done.
Yeah. And the thing
it sounds like your head wasn't quite there.
The main thing I kind of came away with when our course wrapped up was my reel looked very different to what all the other people put together, and I stood out. And I get an email from a guy at Grinding Gear who was like, "Hey, do you want to do this art test?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" And I was there for almost 14 years.
Wow.
And so Grinding Gear was big for me. Won't go into it too much, but I fell in love with storytelling within that medium. 2013 rolls around and The Last of Us comes out, and it was like this incredible piece, like a masterpiece in my opinion. And I just loved everything about video games up until that point where everyone was kind of trying to one-up each other. It was so exciting, like what games were at that time. And like contributing and learning to this, it just felt super cool, video games back, a decade ago. I ended up leaving. I had my first child, management changes as well. I kind of stepped away and spent more time with my daughter at the time. And yeah, I was just kind of hanging out and doing my, like going through the motions. I was still in video games. But all the while, like, these other things kind of progressed in the background. Like AI now, when people talk about it, it's this massive umbrella term. And like to touch on it in like the 3D production aspect, which was what I was very much involved with there and throughout my career. It's scary to look at this thing that has that can put entire companies out of work. So it's scary on this front. People may not know this, but China is like the workshop of the video games, and a lot of 3D assets, which is largely what video games kind of put their budget towards, is made in China. And there are massive, like we're talking 10,000 staff studios that are based there. And I'd get like job offers from a lot of these places, and I haven't seen any of those in the last 6 months.
Interesting.
And like a lot of these studios,
dried up.
Yeah, like that entire business model, like I don't think is valid. And I'm seeing it from that point of view. I'm glad to be out of game developments. I still obviously love it, but to see that and to think about it is like pretty sad, because that's a huge amount of talent sort of left with no options. Man,
so does that concern you around the role of AI and automation in terms of negative impacts on the workforce?
Like it's one that I think a lot of people are coming to grips with. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm fortunate enough to be outside of it, looking from the outside in. So I have no dog in this. I can see the application. I know what NVIDIA is saying, and it's true. Like a lot of people are going to make a lot of money from this, but a lot of people are going to be out of work as well. Just to touch on stories a little bit, man, there are these things about video games where people talk about storytelling, and I've thought about this a lot, and very much inspired by Naughty Dog and The Last of Us, and just great games with single player story. Think like Red Dead Redemption 2. Like Quantic Dream had a couple as well. But there's just so many games that kind of speak to, well, just tell great stories through that medium. And I went away and I was developing this thing by myself for the longest time. And really I had to put it down when I had my daughter. It's something I want to return to, but what's cool is I can maybe return to it in the future and pull it off by myself maybe. Like that's probably the most exciting thing about what AI means, and to be available to everyone, that if you are creative, you can exercise the things that you're into through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I'm seeing it from both sides.
Cool. Well, tell us about carpooling.
Yeah, this gets us right there.
Yeah. So how did that come about, and what's the big problem you're solving?
It is to reduce traffic, carpooling, and to reduce emissions, which is many companies and nations want to do something about this. And the social aspect, like empowering communities, is one of those key pillars as well. Carpooling, I believe, will make some really big strides in the coming months and years. Here in New Zealand, we've got the second or third highest single passenger private vehicle ownership in the globe. Traffic is abysmal, especially here in Auckland, to the tune of, I believe, like $2 or $3 billion, according to this article that was published earlier this year. This is a really big problem, and there are very few players in this space. We're talking councils and Auckland Transport, largely here in Auckland. But like it's a problem that many Kiwis face, and
So, do you think it's a problem how many cars are on the road?
single passenger travel is the problem, and that number of the amount of occupants within a car in New Zealand is like 1.22. So it's a very low number. To me, I believe that's the problem, where if we actually were to increase that number, we'd have less traffic, that directly correlates. But exploring this a little more, there are direct benefits of just sharing your car as well. Like carpooling is super good for you on like a social level and meeting people. And so this kind of started that idea, and then everything kind of just escalated. I started like developing this early 2024. And yeah, it was really just being fed up and not having alternatives.
So what have you launched so far? Tell us about the app and your offering.
Yeah, definitely. The app is free. You create a profile and list your trip, whatever you want to put out there. And the idea is, this problem that we have is very much the 9 to 5 rush hour traffic that exists at every major town across the country. We all kind of work with other people as well. Like there is common interest to commute with people, especially if you work together, especially if you live close by. Why wouldn't you? There's financial incentive as well. The law around this, by the way, is if you do this for cost, it qualifies as carpooling. If you do it for profit, you're a taxi, and you need to have certain licenses.
That means if you're charging people to contribute towards petrol, and also when you think around what sort of license you need to have,
exactly,
things are very different when you're carpooling versus sharing an Uber with somebody else, right?
Yes, exactly. If you're a cab driver, an Uber driver, you have different insurances, different car registrations, and different licenses. And there are their own governing bodies, but within carpooling, it's cool. Like it enables all those other things that I spoke about. The thing that I'm trying to tell people is I think the solution to our traffic problems are here in the community.
Have you seen anywhere in the world where they've figured this out and they've landed on something where a large chunk of the population has jumped on board, whether they've got something that really works, or is this very much kind of pioneering thing at this stage, and where others have tried, they've so far sort of failed? Where do you see it?
The biggest player in this space is in Europe. It's a company called BlaBlaCar, and I'm not sure what the legal ramifications of carpooling or ride sharing there is, but that seems to be super successful, and a lot of people that go there and backpack across Europe love to talk about it, and just sharing that ride with other people. It's, really social and great for those kinds of things. They have no presence here, but also like this is not what inspired me to make carpooling. Carpooling, what I tell people is it's a community at first. We just happen to want to fix traffic right now. Obviously, safety is this massive aspect. So you don't want to get inside cars with strangers, obviously. That's so verifying users.
I don't know. I do that with Ubers all the time.
Yeah.
I jump in a car with a stranger and I trust that they're okay. They've got a 4 point whatever star rating, and it all seems good.
Yeah, what's the problem?
Similar to jumping in a taxi, except with the digitized version of it.
Yes.
You feel safer than you would with the other. I don't know how the stats play out, but I imagine when there is this element of reviews and the like, and
Yes.
just based on my own personal experiences, and the last taxi ride I took that cost me about at least four times more than the Uber quote, and that was with the Uber price having gone through the roof and been at least double its normal rate. So,
Yeah. I've got nothing against Uber, by the way. Like if you're down with paying, I don't know, $80 to get to the airport, that's fine.
How do you get to the airport? Are
Me?
you able to use the app yet? Do you? I mean, like, how much of an uptake have you had so far?
It's super early. We have a few hundred users right now across the country.
Yep.
My time is spent right now is getting partners on board, councils, businesses.
Right. So if you had Auckland Transport, or you had the council, or some really big businesses on board, I'm just shouting out to those that are listening that are involved in these organisations.
These guys help.
These are the sort of people where you might be able to mutually get some good outcomes.
Yeah. We've got like aligned visions, and we want the same outcomes. We want to reduce traffic.
Yeah.
Show people that carpooling is the way forward. Like I'm convinced that it is.
But of course, you need to get a level of adoption for it
Definitely.
to work. In the same way, if Uber launched into the New Zealand market and there were only 200 users of the app, there'd be a problem. So I guess this is your challenge, is to get that flywheel sort of rolling so you can build up a base of users. Well, I've installed the app today. I'm sure some of our listeners will be curious enough to do so.
My time is spent finding partners, and what's super cool is when you find people that share that vision and want this thing to grow as well. So I'll be announcing our next set of partners like in the next couple of weeks, and we're gonna tackle this problem together. And so we'll be bringing on more people. September's a really busy month, and we're speaking directly with people that would benefit from this. University students here in New Zealand. We all know messaging apps. We've been around them for 30 years.
Yep.
There are no apps with any kind of development around supporting the community. And as I've developed this thing, being around social media and these massive tech companies, like society's kind of gone a different way than I thought of in the 90s and 2000s. It's, many people are worse off in some ways. And so there are these things that kind of feed into my perspective. And these are things I want to incorporate into this product as well, because it's not, I'm learning that it's not time that people want on their phones. It's genuine connection with people. And I strongly believe this. And to kind of bottle that up and wrap it into this product that I'm also building, that's the thing that I'm trying to sell people on. It's that, yes, there are strangers out there, but dude, like you could make a friend. Like you could make, and meet people that share and care for you on a human level. So that's kind of what I'm preaching to. We have no competitors in this space. No one, I mentioned BlaBlaCar. They're all about ride sharing, and those other things kind of happen with it, and that's fine. Like that's a valid business model. That's super cool to see. Carpooling will do this, in the coming years, and the reason I can say that so confidently, I think, is just because that alternative to like sitting at a bus stop and having this bus not show up, or sitting in traffic and just not having, and just feeling powerless to it.
Don't pick on the buses. Come on.
These are stories that I've heard, like speaking to people about it. You know, it's unfortunate. Like public transport is awesome when it works.
Yeah.
But when it doesn't work, geez, it sucks. And carpooling is the solution. And yeah, we're going to start with businesses, you know, and sports clubs. Schools are super tricky to get into. We've had an endorsement from Lower Hutt mayoral candidate Karen Morgan, so she's like supported us, and we're hoping to do things in the region. But yeah, like this is slowly tracking the way I thought. After we get some partners on board, like it, and really just like the council support really does help. It just means that, you know, councils are willing to get behind us and say, hey, like check this out, because like, you know, we can reduce traffic together, but also like councils already want to, you know, strengthen communities as well. So we directly align with goals of councils.
I think the positives are definitely there. And I think, you know, listeners will be very curious to sort of follow the journey.
Let me touch. I'll touch on this one thing that isn't obvious. I haven't spoken about the things that we make money on. So BlaBlaCar, they charge commission from trips, right?
Sure.
So if you and I were to go to the airport, usually in a carpooling thing, they kind of monetize that thing. Carpooling doesn't take any part of that. We feel very strongly about this because, like, I believe that this is really up to you and your driver or passenger, that you're already going to the airport. You're putting in the effort. Like, what is it to you and your passenger? Like, what does that trip cost you? Because you're already going there anyway, right? And so it's the question's more interesting because you're now controlling this, and you get to determine what this other person ships towards, if you even expect payment. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I know.
So how do you monetize? How do you make sure that you get paid?
This is the exciting stuff. Yeah.
The security, you know, all of those pieces.
Yeah, so that's the thing where we're looking for partners and councils and businesses. That's one angle, and the other angle, where our next features around groups and events coming later this year and early next year are what we will be monetizing. These are the products that are community-based products.
Yeah,
and we want you and people that work here at Gorilla to create their own group and carpool together, but also like schools and workplaces to create these as well.
Yep.
People are worried
about
about
the big events. When I think of, say, going to a big stadium in New Zealand.
Oh yeah.
Right, for a big event, and there's tens of thousands of people going there. Parking's a nightmare, and so on.
Oh yeah.
That to me sounds like, hey, that could be even I'm not that far from Eden Park, but drive past Eden Park, or I'm trying to find a park if you're going to something, and people are putting up signs saying you can park on my front lawn for I don't know $30, $40, etc. So I guess that's one of those kind of use cases.
So events is our next feature after groups, and we'll be hoping to release that early next year. We want to partner with Spark Arena, Eden Park, and music venues.
Perfect.
Because how cool would it be to go out to a game, because you love rugby so much, and share a ride with a fan.
Or cricket.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, just throwing that in there. We've got to wrap up. We're over time, but thank you. It's been really, really good to have you on the show, Severn. And look, I think the listeners will be in behind you, keen to support, and I'm sure some folks will be jumping in. That's Carpoolin without a G is the app via your Android. It's Android and iOS, isn't it? I've installed on only one so far. Someone have a look. We'll be following your progress. Big thank you for joining us on the show.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me.
No, pleasure. And, of course, a big thank you to our show partners, to Workday, 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll be back again on the next episode next week. And, we'll look forward to catching you then. All right, see ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.